Our next presenter, ladies and gentlemen, really I feel needs no introduction if you've been in St. Augustine for any amount of time. She is a lifelong coastal Floridian. Now, lots of you know her from her efforts on land, right? For long periods of time, people knew her as the Bike Lady, because she worked incredibly hard to make our roads safe and to make our roads more bike-friendly. And those of us, me included, who spend a lot of time on our bicycles, owe her a big thanks. But her life has always been connected to the deep. She's funny, she's charming, she's driven, and she's mad in all the best ways possible. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Heather Lane, this is Skin Deep, this is Whip It, Come Back.
Skin deep, skin deep. This is Whip It, Come Back. My story begins before I took my first breath of brined myself in the sea. It's the 70s, and two lifelong friends, Stan and Mike, on their tiny boats in the big Atlantic, and love of fishing and diving would save my life. This is skin deep. Go ahead. While time and family result in separate boats, they're only a radio away. Before cell phones and solar and Starlink, you were closest when offshore. Mike, you catch something there? Shit, Stan, the biggest I've ever seen. That was probably a lie. My first memory, I was maybe 6, watching these guys falling tank first backwards in the ocean, bringing my beautiful treasures of lobster and fish. Another time in a tournament, a wall of water, like Davy himself, was chasing us inland to save our lives. We poured our own lead weights, can you imagine? Repurposing household trash for buoys and ice blocks. Before recycling was a thing, we even made our own chum. Skin deep, skin deep. This is Whip It, Come Back. A decade goes by, and I barely step on a boat or the beach. My father and uncle were adamant that there was no future in fishermen. The path was college and settling down. Then my son was born. I could hear the deep calling for me, for him. At 3 months old, I flew to the Keys, baby and backpack, and he met me at the sea. Skin deep, this is Whip It, Come Back. But skin deep did not come back, and I almost didn't either. Another decade passes. Cancer stole Uncle Mike. I lost touch with friends and parents, hiding a failing marriage. Then COVID, divorce, basically unemployed. I almost lost myself to the dark. Then she called me back. I looked for the sea. I returned to the deep while sitting on the sand during that COVID summer, questioning life, God, purpose. Then friendships were born, love of self. A framed birthday card hangs in my home. I'm glad I found you washed up on the beach. I hold gratitude forever for the love of the sea who saved my life. I looked for the sea anywhere and everywhere after that and took my son with me. Fascination, obsession, nervous system maintenance. I began again. My work seems to others vacation, but every trip is part of a 2-year research project, and that's when I knew I will live on the sea. I told this to a friend and client, and mentoring began in 22, learning how to do anything and everything on a sailboat. We began on the hard, became drop-ins at anchorages from Key West to the Bahamas. Provisioning, waste management, navigation, repair. A boat is your whole world, your whole city. You can't dilute your pollution, you must use resources wisely. I go further south. It's funny, the more populated a place, the less people interact. Less people, more connection. I contemplated this. I needed to understand more about humans, the ocean. I recall meeting a state legislature weeks before. Heather, the solution to pollution is dilution. I learned more, and sometimes the hard way. Shortly after that bonfire, I knew something was wrong. Anchored miles from a marina in the Exuma chain, I awoke in pain. Made my way to the bathroom. I was bleeding, internally. I telehealth an ER, you must get to a hospital quickly. You may have an aggressive bacterial infection. A 10-foot dinghy to the dock over a blustery channel before sunrise, boarding a plane. I drove to the ER. Any longer, and I dare not say what was next. After healing, I made 3 more trips before the big passage. As always with boats and captains, I arrived to an engine hanging from the boom and no captain to be found. Befriending some Brits at a bar, I ended up racing in a regatta the next day with Richard Branson's pilot, a Kiwi, and 2 90-year-old men. With a pit in my stomach, away in the dark from West End BVI, I knew the routine and rules for the 24-hour days to come. I'm ill-equipped to describe being the only mate on an 800-mile voyage. I should have sent a poet. It forever changed who I am. I stopped looking for God. I understood why, as a child, our church was the ocean and our only time off work with family in the sea. I had found faith and love. Time in between responding to the wind and sea was consumed by my brush with death and how we shared the planet. Contracting a bacterial infection in an anchorage dilution is delusional. We are the problem and we are the solution. We owe it to ourselves. I must be able to do something. And on the sea, my humanure compost company was born. Sailing on, a dot of sand emerges, flippers on, a quick 100 yards to land. Hogsea Reef have evidence of man everywhere with no footprints. Garbage littered the sandy shoal. Back to the boat, spearfishing for meat seemed like a great idea. As we made our way to the shallow reef with 20 or so shark tour guides 100 miles from the nearest town, back to the boat we went. Arriving to Long Island delirious from 20-minute sleep cycles for 7 days, I recorded this note to myself and slipped asleep under the stars. How unfathomably stupid this was, at the same time amazing. How much you want your kid to be here. It's the comets going across the sky and thousands more stars show themselves. I'm just grateful and I hope he gets to experience this one day. After a few more days' journey to Staniel, greeted my new friends, I returned to Florida changed. I found my son snorkeling and fishing in the Keys with my parents. From his first jump off a boat at years old to dropping in at Wilderness in Puerto Rico at 10, he is fearless in the sea. Was he ready for this sail, or was I? We found a weather window. Sailing a 3-day passage from St. Augustine to the bank, we anchored at an uninhabited key. We swam to shore where no one lived, hiking from Caribbean to Atlantic. The brightest moons, fair seas, it was quiet, he was comfortable. He drove to the next anchorage. The deep is his respite, and I his shepherd. My life and his are now surrounded by the sea. I've logged more than 2,000 hours as a mate and more than 20 years on boats. My experience on land with infrastructure found me equipped to help the marine industry change for the better. The deep isn't scary or vast. The deeper I go, the closer to clarity I am. Everything touching, connecting, providing sustenance and a chance. From policy, composting, the research paper that started it all, I've heard the call and seek opportunities to make our world better. No one is coming to save us. No one else is to blame. We are the solution. The sea, she calls to me. She called to my Uncle Mike, continues to my parents. She calls to my son. She screams for help, or maybe I scream for her. If you listen, she'll call to you too. Tomorrow I head to Mexico to continue my journey as she sees fit. Whether you dive in or just go skin deep on the sand, whip it fast, go fishing, sail slowly, or just float around, go deep. Woo!